seated. Good morning. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the word remember is to have in or be able to bring to one's mind an awareness of someone or something from the past. This summer, ceremonies around the world commemorated the 70th anniversary of D-Day on June 6, 1944, and the 100th anniversary of the start of World War I on July 18, 1914. 4 years later, on November 11, 1918, the war ended. The Great War, the war to end all wars. Today, as you filed into the Killy Theatre, you may have seen one of our most treasured archival possessions from the old chapel at Brentwood Bay. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to look at it just in the lobby here. This honor roll displays every Brentonian that served in World War II, and the center is reserved for those who perished. Later in the service, those names will be read out by the head prefect and assistant head prefects. One name you'll hear is from the famous 1940-41 First 15 rugby team, whose remarkable season ended with the points total for 248 and against only 23. His name is Ian Gillespie. The rugby field today is named after he and his family. During that magical season, they lost only one match to Navy. A teammate of Ian, Colin Lytton Graham, immortalized his friend with this poem, A Distant Time. It reads, "In the changing room after the Navy game, he said, 'Indian, I've enjoyed the Air Force.' Through the steam from the showers, he was already a ghost. 'Live forever, pussycat,' I said. 'I promised you, you'll live forever. We're all immortal when we go to war.' You were posted missing in action. The next I knew, your Beaufighter went down on bomber escort over the Channel. At Runnymede, I saw your name 20 years later. It seemed a terrible waste of the best fullback the world had ever seen. The citation said you died drawing enemy fire. What else? You called for the mark, solid as houses. You tackled like a rattlesnake. You didn't leave the kitchen when the fire got hot. I promise you, you live forever. Well, almost. While I live, so do you." In the 20th century alone, the total casualties of war is in excess of 160 million people, each one with a mother and father, many with spouses and children, all with friends. No matter the side, the bloodshed, sadness, and resilience was the same. As Canadians, we have felt the effects of war. This year's tragic deaths of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent in Quebec and Corporal Nathan Cirillo in Ottawa cause us to reflect and to remember. A symbol of our remembrance are the poppies we wear today. Today we pause to remember the past, learn from our past, and hopefully make our world a better place. That's the Canadian way, and that's the Brentwood way. So today, November 11th, 2014, 96 years after the end of World War I, we remember. As we live, so do they. Lest we forget. Please stand for the singing of the Canadian National Anthem.
Like you, I am not an historian. Like you, I am not a soldier. It is thus difficult for us to remember things that we have not ourselves experienced or have yet to study. Yet here we are at Remembrance Day. Why are we here? Over the years, I have heard stories from relatives and friends and read from books about the events of the First and Second Wars. I remember these stories, and I will tell you about 3 people and how they acted in and were acted on by these terrible years of war. My grandfather, Oliver Ainsley. Oliver Ainsley moved to Canada at the age of 1. With his family, they traveled west from Montreal as the construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway was completed. The family settled in Revelstoke, BC. As my young grandfather hunted and fished on the western edge of the Rocky Mountains, he learned the trade of blacksmith. His father worked as a boilermaker for the CPR. This was the muscular age of the steam engine. Like most young men in the mountains those days, he was tough. He was strong. He could look after himself. When the call went out for volunteers to join the Kootenai Regiment to help Britain, he did not hesitate. Miners, loggers, railwaymen from all over central BC signed up, and my grandfather was soon promoted from private to corporal to help keep order in the exuberant ranks. Regiment 54 was hastily sent to France. Just as quickly they were massed with millions of other young men into immense formations. It was at the Battle of the Somme where young Oliver had his first taste of modern war. 420,000 British and colonial soldiers killed, 500,000 Germans, 200,000 French. It was common to lose 100,000 lives a day to bombs, bullets, mines, shells, poison gas, and even drowning in the sticky Flanders mud. Kootenai Regiment number 54 quickly learned the real nature of the struggle, and the men coalesced into a powerful and focused fighting group. Oliver contributed in his new role as sergeant. By the Battle of Arras, Oliver was the sergeant major of the regiment, the highest rank of a non-commissioned officer. This is my grandfather's swagger stick. It was a symbol of authority. His responsibilities included morale and discipline. He was responsible to keep them high at all times. The Battle of Vimy Ridge, Hill 70, and Passchendaele demonstrated that Canada had an extremely disciplined army. Canadian and other Allied forces overran the last defense of the German army at the Hindenburg Line. On November 11th of 1918, Oliver stood in the city of Le Mans and was awarded a commission in the army as Lieutenant Oliver Ainsley. He always told me that he rose in the ranks because everyone else was killed. Possibly. He also told me that the First World War was a time when the world went mad. Definitely. My father-in-law, Al Minnings. Al was born in Lanigan, Saskatchewan in 1922 in a farmhouse on one of the poorest patches of soil in central Saskatchewan. His father was a German immigrant's son. The Great Depression and the Dust Bowl condition of the prairies had made life very hard, but it also produced strength and resilience in many of the young men of the region. They knew hardship, endurance, and hard work. As Europe once again descended into war, he decided, like many other farm boys in the area, to join the Regina Rifles. They were affectionately known as the Farmer Johns. After some basic training in Canada, he was sent to England, and on D-Day in 1944, he sat in a landing craft off the coast of Juno Beach. They were a small part of a vast army or armada of British and Canadian and American troops. Through the morning mist, they headed into the land. When the bow of the craft struck ground at 8:20 and the ramp was dropped down, Al could see the sand of the beach in front of him dancing like it was alive as it reacted to the impact of machine gun bullets. All he had to do was run through this torrent of lead and get to the hill at the top of the beach, and he would have reached his first objective. He ran, and he lived, but many did not. After silencing the machine guns, D Company made their way inland, and by nightfall, the Regina Rifles had pushed further into France than any other part of the invasion force. He and his fellow Johns then fought their way north along the west coast of France, Belgium, and then Holland against well-trained and highly disciplined SS troops at great cost to both the German and the Canadian Army. The horrific night battle at the Leopold Canal, where the conflict degenerated into close combat, frequently hand-to-hand, lit only by magnesium flares, flamethrowers, and muzzle flashes from guns, was the ultimate test of endurance of both body and mind. Each army was committed to fight to the last man. The Canadians ultimately prevailed. Last June, the Republic of France awarded Elle and a number of others their highest honor, the rank of Knight of the French National Order of the Legion of Honor. This is the letter he received from the French ambassador in Ottawa, inviting him to France to receive the medal. The shadow. This last story is the shortest. This picture above represents less than a second of conflict. It is morning in Hiroshima. This shadow is all that remains of an old woman who lived in that city on August 11, 1945. An atomic bomb had been dropped from a plane less than a minute before, and this photo captures the moment of its detonation. The marks on the granite stairs reveal arthritic ankles, and she needed a cane. It appears she was carrying a bundle in her right arm. Just as she raised her cane to push on the bottom stair, a spark opened up in the sky about 1,200 meters above and behind her head. This spark was formed in less than a millionth of a second and was hotter than the temperature of the core of a star. Her body was simultaneously struck with gamma rays that tore apart the very molecules of which she was made. The atomic bomb quickly expanded to a ball of fire at the temperature of the surface of the sun. It filled the whole sky behind her. The heat radiation was extreme, and the granite of the steps beside her was charred and burnt into white ash. The rock that was shadowed by her body was not burnt, however, and the stone remains dark to this day. In a few more milliseconds, this moment would be over. Winds measured in thousands of miles an hour would now strike her and blow her away. This old woman and 70,000 others died within minutes on this day. They were also part of this war. The good fortune of my grandfather and my father-in-law, by good fortune, they survived. If they had not, I, my wife, would not be alive on this day. 100 million people lost their lives to conflict and the associated starvation and disease between 1914 and 1945. So much was offered and given by our ancestors. So much was sacrificed
light of hope in their eyes. And though I'm far away, I still can hear them say, sons, ah. For when the dawn comes, there'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. Tomorrow, just you wait and see. There'll be love and laughter and peace ever after. Tomorrow, when the world is free. The shepherd will tend his sheep, the valley will bloom again, and Jimmy will go to sleep in his own little room somewhere. There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. Tomorrow, just you wait and see.
Sounds of sickening coughs and petrified moans echo through the metal box. Your limbs ache from exhaustion. Your throat is dry from dehydration. Scared and confused, all you can do is wait. All of a sudden, Death's transport is halted to a stop. The train doors open. The light is blinding after being shut in the darkness for so many hours. You duck down and hide your face. One by one, each person is pushed out of the box train. The air is cold and smells of death. Barbed wires and fences surround you. You are a prisoner, held in captivity, and you haven't really any idea what is going on. You hear screams and cries of fear. You've arrived at Bergen-Belsen. At the age of 8, my grandfather, Gabriel Kramer, found himself engulfed by the clutches of Nazi Germany's final solution. A citizen of Hungary, he, his brothers, parents, and 2 grandmothers found themselves taken from the quiet, peaceful university town of Kosovar and thrown into sophisticated anarchy. Put yourself in his shoes. Feel his confusion and his fear. 8 years old. My grandfather spent 9 months in Bergen-Belsen before being lifted from this organized treachery and systematic death machine. Rudolf Karsnar, a Jewish Hungarian known for helping Jews to escape the Holocaust, was able to negotiate a trade agreement with the Nazis for military resources and supplies. Considered a kind of Noah's Ark, the train consisted of 35 cattle trucks which transported 1,684 passengers to Switzerland. Sadly, this was only a very small portion of the 437,000 Hungarian Jews deported to concentration camps, particularly Auschwitz, of whom 3/4 were gassed. My grandfather is a survivor, but lives with the terrible memories of Nazi concentration camp. He and his family are only one of millions of examples during this time period. The Holocaust was indeed a great era of darkness and must never be forgotten. Nor should we let the 6 million Jews and millions of others who perished have lost their lives in vain. Unfortunately, the practice of genocide did not end with the Holocaust. To this day, it is still very prevalent globally. Armenia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and as we are gathered here today, ISIS is on the borderline of a genocidal war. As we show care and compassion for each other at Brentwood, it is equally important to embrace our collective responsibility to protect our rights and diversity as a whole. Evil will always exist. We cannot extinguish evil, but rather try to prevent it. I ask you to never forget. Events such as the Holocaust are defining moments in world history, and though horrifying to recall and wrenching for the survivors to remember, we must continue to remember. We must continue to speak out. We must continue to teach each new generation.
Here Dead We Lie by A.E. Housman. Here dead we lie, because we did not choose to live, and shame the land from which we sprung.
Life, to be sure, is nothing much to lose, but young men think it is, and we were young.
Many of the dead were not much older than most of us. Their future was exciting for them as our plans are. Yet they had to leave the classroom and the playing field, the art studio and the boathouse, to die in muddy wastelands and on desolate mountainsides, in icy oceans and on blood-stained beaches.
Pause to think about how great a sacrifice this would be for all of us today. We are asked to commit ourselves to excellence in academics, sports, and the arts. They were asked to commit their lives.
Some who died came from Brentwood. In the lobby of the theater stands the Roll of Honor, brought over from the old chapel, which was built by a past generation of Brentonians. This memorial records the names of the Brentwood fallen. Let us pay homage to the courage of those Brentonians who sacrificed their lives for their country. Please stand for the reading of the Roll of Honor, the Last Post, the Silent Tribute, and the Reveille.
Old boys of Brentwood College who lost their lives during the World War of 1939 to 1945.
Alec Balache, Dacre Barrett Leonard, Norman Beard,
John Bishop, John Bryden, John Campbell,
Arthur Coulter, Alan Dunlop, Robert Field,
Ian Gillespie, John Gillespie, Bruce Hanbury,
Barnett Harvey, Sholto Marlatt, Alan Mayhew,
Ken Osler, Richard Proctor, Robert Proctor,
Lee Salter, Ralph Smith, John Stubbs,
Donald Stewart, Glenn Svensson, Michael Simmons.
Thornton White, Lawrence Wilkinson, and Ted Williams.
Yeah, so excuse me, just please stand again for a moment of silence. Sorry.
It might be love and all of the things he was so scared of. He said, when it's getting kinda rough over here, I think of that day sitting down at the pier, and I close my eyes and see your pretty smile. Don't worry, but I won't be able to write for a while. I cried, never gonna hold the hand of another guy. Too young for him, they told her, waiting for the love of a traveling soldier. Our love will never end, waiting for the soldier to come back again. Never more to be alone when the letter says the soldier's coming home. One Friday night at a football game, the Lord's Prayer said and the anthem sang. The men said, folks, would you bow your heads to the list of local Vietnam dead? Cried all alone under the stands was a piccolo player in the marching band, and one named Red, but nobody really cared. But a pretty little girl with a bow in her hair. I cried, never gonna hold the hand of another guy. Too young for him, they told her, waiting for the love of a traveling soldier. Our love will never end, waiting for the soldier to come back again. Never more to be alone when the letter says the soldier's coming. I cried, never gonna hold the hand of another guy. Too young for him, they told her, waiting for the love of a traveling soldier. Our love will never end, waiting for the soldier to come back again. Never more to be alone when the letter says a soldier's coming home.
I run the soft carpet through my 5-year-old hands. My granddad sits wounded. Wounded not only physically, but mentally. Maimed by his memories, barely escaping death. My Scottish great-grandfather grew up in fear during the First World War, often hidden away as the sirens rang death. He later served in the British Navy during the Second World War, fighting for our freedom, fighting for a way to live. On the other side of my family, during the Second World War, my German great-grandfather was a prisoner of war in the United Kingdom for 2 years. Contrary to the death camps of Germany, he often spoke positively about his experience as a prisoner of war in England and Scotland. My paternal granddad, Sergeant Major Robert Macintosh, was born in Scotland and grew up during the Second World War. He was conscripted under government legislation to join the British Army in 1953. He was 18 years old. His first overseas assignment as a soldier of the Black Watch, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, was in Africa in the late 1950s. Their goal was to peacekeep and to intervene during the Mau Mau tribe uprising, to stop this Kenyan tribe from massacring thousands of men, women, and children. Beginning in 1963, my granddad spent almost 7 years in jungle warfare throughout many of the islands off Malaysia and Singapore. His regiment's purpose was to stop Malaysia and Singapore from being invaded by the neighboring Indonesia as Singapore sought independence. After Singapore, where my dad was born, my granddad and his young family were transferred to West Berlin. These were the years of the Cold War. His job was to maintain a military presence of the British, Americans, French, and Russians. It took 28 years until 1989 for the Iron Curtain, or the Berlin Wall, to fall and to start the liberation of the former Eastern Bloc countries. My granddad served in the British Special Forces and spent a number of years on numerous missions around the world and several tours of Northern Ireland during their troubles. My dad said that he and his siblings never knew where my granddad was in the world. Lost in grief, "Where is my dad?" they would ask. He and his siblings never knew. All they could do was pray that he would come home safely each time. My dad said that he and his two sisters used to wait anxiously in the military camp waiting room each month for a 5-minute phone call from his dad somewhere in the world. They were fortunate. The telephone always rang. My dad went to a Scottish military boarding school from the age of 11 and was headed to the Sandhurst Military College in 1982 to follow his father and his grandfather's footsteps and travel the world. Many of my dad's friends took this route and today are high-ranking officers. However, my dad, Andy Macintosh, declined his decision to decline from Sandhurst because there are so many of his school friends' fathers that were killed in action during his time at school. War has far-reaching effects beyond the front line. These effects are incomprehensible for most of us here today. My granddad was a quiet, unassuming, and selfless man. He served his country, supported his military family from around the globe as his dad did before him, in hopes of creating a safer and more peaceful world. This year, my cousin James will be taking after the Macintosh tradition of warfare. I ask you not to keep only my cousin, but the thousands of other soldiers and civilians in your mind as he's first deployed to Kenya and later Afghanistan. With so much sadness and pain in our small world today, I would like to leave you with my call to peace. I have found these words in which I believe to be appropriate. Written by an Indian-born poet and writer, Sri Chimney. World peace can be achieved when, in each person, the power of love replaces the love of power.
Places I'll remember all my life, though some have changed,
some forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain.
All these places had their moments with lovers and friends. I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living.
In my life, I love them all. Do 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 do. Oh.
I know I'll never lose affection
for people and things.